Silence is one of the most powerful responses you can ever give, not because it hurts someone, but because it reveals what words could never express. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to convince her to stay, you create a space where the truth rises to the surface. As long as you are the one reaching out, checking in, and holding the connection together, she never has to feel the loss. She never has to face the reality of what life is like without your presence. But the moment you go silent, she is left with only her thoughts, her emotions, and her memories. And that is where realization begins. When there is constant communication, a person can easily overlook your value. Your presence becomes familiar, expected, and taken for granted. But silence breaks that pattern. Silence interrupts the comfort. Silence creates distance where emotional clarity can finally form. It's in that distance where she starts to notice the absence of your support, your consistency, your loyalty, your stability. She begins to compare what you offered to what she has now, and comparisons always reveal the truth more clearly than conversations. Silence also allows both of you to regain your emotional balance. When emotions are high, when pain or frustration is involved, conversations rarely lead to understanding. They usually lead to defensiveness, arguments, or emotional outbursts. Silence gives the heart room to settle. It gives both sides time to breathe, reflect, and see things without ego or fear guiding the reaction. This is why silence is not about ignoring her. It's about giving the situation space. Space is where growth happens. Space is where appreciation begins. Space is where respect is recalibrated. For you, silence is the moment you return to yourself. You are no longer trying to change her mind. You are no longer seeking validation or reassurance. You are no longer using someone else's responses to define your sense of worth. You step back into your own center. You remember your value, your purpose, your priorities outside of the relationship. You stop asking, "What can I do to make her stay?" And you start living in a way that naturally demonstrates your strength, your confidence, and your ability to stand on your own. And here is the part most men overlook. Silence forces her to feel. When there is no message, no call, no attention, she is left alone with her emotions. She begins to replay the past. She remembers how you supported her, how you listened, how you stood beside her. She notices the difference between your presence and everyone else's. This realization doesn't happen immediately. It happens slowly, quietly, deeply, and it's far more powerful than any speech you could give. Silence is not giving up. Silence is letting reality speak for you. You can't convince someone to see your value by talking. You can't argue your way into being appreciated. A woman does not respect or return because of explanations, emotional speeches, or promises to do better. She returns when she feels the difference between your presence and your absence. She returns when she experiences life without the comfort, stability, and emotional safety you brought. This is why detachment is so powerful. It shifts the experience from something she hears to something she actually feels. People learn through contrast. When you were available, supportive, and present, she didn't have to think about it. It was simply there. It was familiar. It was easy to assume it would always be there. But when you step back, when you stop offering your emotional investment freely, she begins to notice what she once overlooked. She starts to remember the small things. Your tone, your steadiness, the way you listened, the way you made things feel simple when her world felt chaotic. These are the kinds of things that cannot be replaced by just anyone. These are the things a woman only realizes in absence. This is why emotional control matters so deeply. When you stay calm and centered, you send a message without speaking. You show that you are not controlled by fear of losing her. You show that your sense of identity is not tied to whether she chooses you today or not. That emotional independence is rare. Most men crumble under emotional pressure, chase when they feel distance, plead when they feel rejection. But the man who can stay grounded, the man who can stay patient, the man who can walk away with peace instead of desperation, that man becomes unforgettable. She may not say anything at first. She may act like the separation doesn't bother her. She may stay silent herself. But silence is not proof of indifference. It is proof of processing. People don't feel the weight of loss instantly. It comes gradually, in quiet moments, when the world is still and the heart has space to remember. That's when she starts to think. That's when she replays memories. That's when she examines whether she moved too quickly, took you for granted, or misread what she thought she didn't need anymore. And during this time, your job is not to check whether she is thinking about you. Your job is to continue living. You invest in your growth, you build your life stronger, you improve your mind, your body, your discipline, your direction. Because when she starts to feel the loss, and she will, it matters what she comes back to find. If she returns to the same man she walked away from, nothing changes. But if she returns to a man who has elevated himself, who has become more focused, more confident, more grounded, then the entire dynamic shifts. Now she is not returning to familiarity. She is returning to something she respects. Value isn't spoken. It's felt. When you detach, the silence you create gives her space to feel something she didn't feel when you were constantly present. The reality of losing you. Most men don't understand that emotional impact comes from absence, not presence. When you stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop trying to fix things, something powerful happens internally for her. At first, she might feel relief or freedom because the pressure and emotional intensity are gone. But that phase doesn't last, because eventually the mind revisits what was familiar, especially when emotions were deeply connected. The silence you hold becomes a mirror that reflects her own feelings back to her. Women process emotions in waves. She may go out, distract herself, talk to friends, post online, act like she's fine. But eventually the mind slows down and the heart catches up. Nights get quieter, old memories start replaying, the moments where you were good to her start resurfacing. Not the breakup moment, not the arguments, but the softness, the consistency, the support. Silence unlocks reflection, and reflection brings emotional clarity. She starts remembering who you were in her weakest moments, not just the final chapter. That's when the longing begins, but this only happens when your silence is genuine, not a tactic. If your silence is full of anxiety, waiting for her to call, watching her social media every hour, you haven't really detached. True detachment means your focus has shifted back to yourself. Your energy is on your growth, your purpose, your discipline. That inner shift changes everything because emotional strength is something she can feel even without communication. Women are intuitive. They can sense when a man is holding on emotionally, and they can sense when he has let go. The latter is when respect returns. The reason silence and emotional control make her rethink everything is because most men can't do it. Most men beg, chase, apologize for things they didn't even do wrong, or try to buy her love back through effort. When you don't react emotionally, when you don't collapse under pressure, she realizes you are not like most men, and that realization alone creates a spark of curiosity. Curiosity turns into wonder. Wonder turns into reflection. And reflection eventually turns into reaching out. She becomes the one who wonders what you're doing. She becomes the one who replays the last conversation. She becomes the one who questions if she made the right decision. The power of silence is not about hurting her or punishing her. It's about allowing natural emotions to surface. It's about creating the room for her to feel what you felt when she pulled away. And eventually, when the silence settles in and her distractions fade, she realizes something she didn't expect. You weren't just someone she was with, you were someone she needed. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop trying to prove your value, something profound happens inside you. Your sense of identity begins to shift away from her opinion and back into your own hands. Most men don't realize how deeply they were attaching their self-worth to the relationship until they lose it. They don't see how much of their emotional stability was tied to her mood, her validation, or her attention. True detachment forces you to rebuild that foundation. It pulls you back into yourself. And once you begin rebuilding from within, you start to rediscover the version of you that existed before the emotional chaos, before the clinginess, before the confusion. The version of you that is grounded, confident, and centered. This rebuilding isn't about pretending not to care. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need external validation to feel strong. You start re-engaging with your life. You reconnect with your purpose. You pick up discipline again. You go back to the gym not because you want her to see it, but because you want to feel strong in your own skin. You pursue your goals because they matter to you. You surround yourself with things that make you feel alive and powerful, and slowly you begin to feel something you might not have felt in a long time, inner peace. This is the stage where the emotional tables start to turn, and not because you are trying to make them turn. When a woman sees that you are no longer emotionally dependent on her, it shakes her perception of you. She begins to realize you were not broken by her absence. She notices that your world did not fall apart when she stepped away. And this is where a deep shift occurs in how she sees you. Independence is attractive. Emotional stability is rare. A man who can feel love but not lose himself in it is unforgettable. The reason she eventually starts to return is because she starts to feel something she didn't expect. A loss of influence. She no longer feels like your emotional center. She no longer feels like you're waiting, and that loss of emotional control creates curiosity, which then evolves into desire. But understand, this is not about playing games. You are not ignoring her to manipulate her. You are not going silent to force a reaction. You are simply choosing yourself, and when you choose yourself, you automatically shift the dynamic. The man who rebuilds himself after detachment doesn't just get stronger. He becomes more selective. He no longer clings. He no longer fears losing someone who can walk away. He understands that connection is a choice, not a possession. And a woman can feel that difference immediately. That is what makes her rethink her decision. That is what makes her return, not to the old version of you, but to the man she always hoped you would become. When she begins to feel the silence, when she starts to notice the space where your presence used to be, something else happens that is even more important. She starts comparing. Not consciously at first, not in a dramatic way, but slowly and subtly in daily life. She compares how other men talk to her, how they show up, how they lead, how they make her feel, and she realizes that what was normal with you is not typical. The way you listened, the way you grounded the relationship during emotional moments, the way you didn't need to control or prove anything, that becomes something she can't easily find again. And this is where the regret begins to take shape. Women are emotional memory-based beings. They hold on to moments that made them feel safe, cherished, understood, and supported. Those moments don't disappear just because a breakup happens. They stay stored inside her, and when she meets someone new or tries to distract herself, she begins noticing what's missing. The qualities she once took for granted now become things she silently wishes she could have again. The world outside your relationship becomes a teaching ground, Life demonstrates your value to her without you having to say a word. But this process only works when you truly let go. If you are watching her every move, liking her posts, responding instantly, or trying to show her you're okay, you interrupt the emotional contrast she needs to feel. The regret grows only when she experiences life where she no longer has access to the emotional safety you provided. That's what makes her wonder. Wondering leads to remembering. Remembering leads to missing. Missing leads to wanting. And wanting leads to reaching out. This is also the point where your energy matters more than your actions. If she reaches out and feels the same emotional dependence or insecurity from before, the cycle resets. But if she reaches out and she feels your groundedness, your peace, your strength, your calm confidence, that is when the dynamic changes. She needs to feel that you are not waiting, not wounded, not bitter, but evolving, not cold, but strong, not distant, but centered, and this is why patience is everything. The return does not happen quickly. It does not happen on your timeline. It happens when her emotional processing has run its course. The average person does not feel the full emotional consequence of losing someone until time slows down, distractions fade, and the emotional bond resurfaces from memory. Silence allows that timeline to unfold naturally. You cannot rush it. Trying to rush it destroys the entire process. So instead of waiting for her return, you live, you grow. You strengthen your life. You become better not for her, but for yourself. And that self-evolution is what makes her return not only possible, but inevitable. Because the version of you she walked away from is not the same version she will find again, and that difference changes everything. The moment she comes back is not the moment to celebrate, it's the moment to stay grounded. The return is where most men fail because they rush back in emotionally, eager to restore what was lost. But understand this, the comeback is not the ending, it's the test. When she returns, she's checking to see if the change in you is real or temporary. She's looking for consistency. She wants to know whether the strength you developed during the silence is something you truly embody, or something you were just performing to get her back. If you crumble into old patterns, the dynamic resets, and she loses respect all over again. But if you stay aligned with the centered version of yourself, the power balance shifts permanently. This means when she reaches out, your energy must be calm, patient, and composed. You aren't cold or distant. You're simply stable. You are no longer emotionally reacting to her presence or absence. You are choosing her, not needing her. And that difference is everything. A man who needs her approval loses himself. A man who chooses her from a place of strength leads the relationship. Your tone becomes lighter, your words become fewer, you no longer try to explain or justify, you listen more. You speak with clarity, you move with intention, because now the relationship is no longer about chasing emotional validation, it's about alignment. You are building a dynamic where love is mutual, respect is mutual, and connection flows naturally. The moment she senses that your emotional foundation rests within yourself, she relaxes into her feminine again. She softens, she becomes more affectionate, more expressive, more attentive. Not because you demanded it, but because she feels safe to do so. Your stability brings out her vulnerability. This is also where boundaries matter most. You cannot return to old cycles. Whatever behaviors led to emotional imbalance before must be handled with maturity now. You are not trying to control her or restrict her. You are simply communicating clearly what you will and will not accept. Not through anger, not through pressure, but through certainty. When a man can calmly state his standards without defensiveness, a woman respects him deeply. The more you maintain your center, the more she opens up emotionally. She begins to value the connection again, not because of what you say, but because of how she feels when she is with you. The relationship becomes healthier, deeper, more meaningful because it is built from a place of emotional strength rather than fear. But here is the truth. The journey is not about getting her back. The journey is about becoming the man who does not lose himself in love. The return is just a reflection of the work you've done. When you detach, grow, rebuild, and then stand firm when she returns, the relationship evolves into something new, and this time it lasts.